Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to making a spooky Halloween card featuring Technique Junkies, two new stamps, Zombies and Bloody Halloween. By the way, these stamps are on sale for 15% off, but today, September 8th, 2021 is the last day you can get them at 15% off. So head on over to techniquejunkies.com and pick them up if you like them. Okay, let's get started. First, I die cut a circle using masking paper, and then I ink blended that circle using Catherine Pooler Blackjack ink. Now, I very lightly blended this. I did not press very hard because Blackjack is a pretty dark gray, and I mean, it's gray, and I didn't want the moon to be completely saturated, in other words. Once I did that, I just pulled that up off of my paper. The paper that I'm using is Hammermill Premium Color Copy Cover, 100 pounds. And that's my moon. So it's definitely a dark moon. But once I get done with the panel and put the clouds on the panel, it doesn't look that dark. Now I'm going to take this stencil from a Colorful Life Designs. This is the Simple Ground Stencil, which is part of the Colorful Life Designs recent release. And you can get anything that you see, I will have listed in the description box below my video, where you can look up more information on these products in case they interest you. But I love this stencil. I'm using the top half of it. It's a split stencil. So you can use the top half for making these perfect ground features, and then they worked out really well for this card. Now I'm going to stamp the zombies from Technique Junkies directly on top of the ground that I just ink blended using the A Colorful Life Designs stencil. I used Catherine Pooler Archival ink, Midnight Archival ink, to stamp the zombies directly on top of this, and it looks just perfect. You can stamp it twice, but really, I think it looks pretty good for just even a one stamp. But I'll go ahead and do it again just to make sure that I'm getting some really deep, dark stamped image that gives me a nice contrast with the color of the ground below and the moon above. I'm using the Cloud Edger stencil from A Colorful Life Designs and Pan Pastels to create clouds. I have violet pan pastel. Pan pastels are a highly pigmented pan or round container of pastel. They do not have the same kind of fallout that you experience with pastel pencils or pastel coloring medium that you usually see in a stick, because they are pressed into this pan. They're definitely easier to use for one thing, especially with ink blending. With blending, I mean, it's not ink. I don't want to call it chalk because it's nothing like chalk at all. It just reminds you of a real expensive high-end cosmetic eyeshadow. It doesn't have like all the sparkly pigment in it that an eyeshadow would, unless you get the sparkly pan pastels. But it's just so easy to work with and so effortless to create backgrounds. And so I'm just using two different colors of pan pastels to begin with. I'm using blue and I'm using purple. And I'm just taking the cloud edger and just moving it around to get some of that pan pastel blended. This paper, this Hammermill paper, is really great for blending anything, whether it be pan pastels or inks, anything like that. So you'll see here I'm moving forward with this blending. You can see that I have a little bit of blue and I've got my purple. Now I'm going to take a little bit of gray and I'm just going to try to tone that down a little bit because I really want this to look like a night sky, not necessarily a sky right before the dark. In other words, I just take the gray pan pastel and I go ahead and I just put some gray in with the already existing colors that I'm using in the background. Another thing about the pan pastels that I really enjoy, you can erase them if you don't like something, and I like the fact that it doesn't take a lot of pressing or like sometimes when you're ink blending something you have to press a little bit hard. You don't have to with pan pastels because they're so effortless to create with. They do not take a lot of pressure, in other words. So someone from I've got arthritis, and so that really does help with my joints and my hands, not to have to press so hard. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking that cloud edger stencil and I'm just filling in more gray, just darkening it up in places where I think it's too bright. And you can take your stencil and use it sort of as a mask. So you don't really want to put the pan pastels directly over top of what you just stamped, although you can, and then stamp over it again. Because one thing about pan pastels, you can do your ink blending and then stamp on top of what you've ink blend. Or if I wanted to, I could keep the stamp in my stamp positioning tool and then just go back in and restamp it again. But what I'm doing is I'm using that stencil to mask off the areas that are stamped and then put the clouds around those areas. And for some reason, my camera just keeps blurring. I don't know why it's doing that on this video. I'm not sure if it's just the colors that I'm using. I'm not really sure. But I am trying to finish up this background. Doesn't take very long. It's looking pretty good. Still a little bit too much purple for my taste, and I love purple. But it's a little bit too purpley for the card that I'm aiming for here. And I'll keep on working it until I get what I like. And then I'm just creating sort of some gray around the edges. Just looking to see if I can just create a little bit of contrast around the edges. Actually, I think I end up using a little bit of ink around the edges to darken it up a little bit. And you'll see that at the end when I show you my still photo. So I'm going to load this back up. That's a previous panel that I worked on. I'm going to load this back up into my stamp positioning tool and stamp it again with this black archival ink from Catherine Pooler. And this is what I was saying earlier. You can go ahead and ink blend right over top of what you already, not ink blend, you can go ahead with your pan pastels and cover up what you already stamped and then go back over it again with your stamped image, and it's going to look crisp and clear. You won't even know that you covered it with some pan pastels. And then my one little zombie was kind of floating a bit, so I took the stencil and went back over and created a little bit of grounding for him. But that's the sentiment. That's Bloody Halloween. I stamped it off camera and I fussy cut it and just trying to figure out how I want to position it on this card panel. And the card that's down in the lower left, the lower right hand corner, that was an earlier version that I sort of like my prototype version, in case you're wondering why I have two there. Okay, this is me fussy cutting, and I'm just removing the one splotch of blood because it would have otherwise interfered with my zombie's head. So that's the only reason I did that. I would have kept it on there, but I didn't feel, I wanted to cover up the zombie. I did not want to cover up the zombie's head. So I have the archival ink, Catherine Polar Midnight ink, and I'm just using that stencil just to create a little bit more of a ground cover for the zombie that I felt was kind of floating. I just wanted to raise that up just a little bit so that his feet were touching something. And this is where I take the ink and decide to go around the edge of the card panel and blend the edges with Catherine Polar archival ink. Oh, wait, I'm still working on this ground area for this zombie, but I decided not to because I was worried that I would cover the zombie's foot up, and I didn't want to do that. So, good, good, good. Let's go ahead, take this foam domed blending tool, and just ink blend this so that it's dark. You can see the difference there between that blackjack ink and the Catherine Polar Midnight ink. You can see there's a big contrast there. It's a dark gray though, blackjack, whereas Midnight is definitely a dark black ink. Next, I just pop my sentiment up on some foam tape and adhere it to the card panel, and then put the card panel on a A2 card base. Here's a still shot of the final card. Hopefully you like this card. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I go live about once a week and put up video at least once a week, if not more often. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Please leave a comment. I love reading your comments, and I'd love to hear what you think about this zombies stamp and Bloody Halloween sentiment from Technique Junkies. Thanks so much for watching. Have a hopeful day. Bye bye.